everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Real Estate Jam session. I got tired of logging on to all these real estate publications that we look at being in commercial real estate every day. I get market data here. A couple hours later, I look at another publication and get market data there. And they go against each other. So we decided to create this YouTube show so we could bring on panelists from around the country that can walk you through what's really going on in their marketplace. And so we're going to be doing these on a regular basis. So make sure that you go up, subscribe so you don't miss out on these, because we've got some great panelists on track for coming on board. So thank you. Again, make sure you subscribe and make sure you like every one of the videos too.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for being part of the Real Estate Jam session. This is something that we came up with because, there's a lot of information that's out there. You can read one real estate publication in the morning, read one a couple hours later, and it really contradicts each other. So we want to put this panel together of commercial real estate professionals. This specific Real Estate Jam session is geared towards the office market, and I really think that bringing in the top professionals in their market, you can give us a lot of data really used to make decisions with. Our viewers are always reaching out saying, can you put, I need something about office. So I thought this is perfect. So thank you for coming on today. And thank you for taking the time, because I know you're all super busy right now. We're anxious to learn about what's going on in each one of your markets. What we'll do is, I'll do a quick introduction actually. I've got upper left, George Pino in Los Angeles. I've got, I'm going off a different one. Nevada, I have Natalie Wainwright. Houston, Coy Davidson. Arizona, Emily.Currie. Dallas, john.pelletier. Denver is Ryan.link. Austin, Kristi Simmons. In New York is Gabe Marans. So thank you guys. It's very much appreciated. I'm anxious to hear all of the market data that you guys have. What we'll do is we'll do a quick 5 to 10 second introduction about yourself and your company and your market, and then just jump right into the market data, leasing, sales, investment information, all the information you can give us. And then once you're done giving us that data, we'll open it up to questions. So if George finishes and Natalie, you have questions, feel free to ask. And so we really want to break this down for the viewers so they know what's going on in your market. Into this, we're going to put all your contact information. It's actually already up on john.pelletier.co. What are you drinking there, Natalie?
Mineral water.
Oh, okay. It's already up on the website, john.pelletier.co. We'll put a video out in the next day or two, so depending on the editing. But all right, why don't we, Coy, since you were last to the group, and it looks like you're on vacation, why don't you go ahead and go first and tell us what's going on in Houston right now?
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Coy Davidson. I work with Colliers in Houston. I'm a tenant rep focused primarily on the office and healthcare market, 30 years in the business. Houston is the softest office market among the major markets in the country, at least in terms of vacancy. I think we're at about 22%. The interesting thing is that's not so much COVID related as it is the downturn in energy prices we saw before COVID. So COVID really hasn't contributed that much to the vacancy other than it's delayed in a recovery. Rents are holding pretty firm. We haven't seen a huge decline in rents, although we have seen a huge increase in concessions. I think that's pretty much what we're seeing nationwide. Did not have positive absorption in 2020, but the rate of negative absorption in the fourth quarter was drastically down from previous quarters. Texas is a little more open than most states, so I've been following the Castle systems, kind of tracking how much people are back in the office, and I think we're amongst the leaders, at least in terms of back to the office. And then we have a big event this week in that the governor of the state did away with the mask restriction as of Wednesday. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of people getting comfortable going back to the office. Like everywhere else, the vaccines are rolling out. So it's going to be an interesting time to see people's attitudes and employers' attitudes about putting people back in the office going forward.
What are you seeing as far as your concessions? Are they creeping back down a little bit, or are they staying about the same?
No, that concessions have increased. We're seeing higher TI allowances, particularly for credit tenants, and more free rent in the marketplace, abated parking. So landlords are trying to hold on to their rents and keep the cash flows and the values of their buildings up, at least for now. So they've made the choice to increase their concessions to attract tenants. Activity's up. It really picked up towards the first of the year.
Okay. Are you seeing what about investments in office? Are you seeing a lot of transactions happening, or?
No, not really.
No, not really. What about new construction?
Well, new construction is one of the reasons our market's pretty soft. So that's if the project wasn't underway, that's not nobody's announcing new projects. One of the reasons we have so much vacancy is we had a lot of office space built when energy prices were high, particularly in what we call the energy quarter, which is the western quarter of the city and up north. And so we had a ton of space built, and then energy prices dropped. So then the oil and gas companies, which we're highly dependent on, started pulling back. So that's the reason we have so much vacancy. So new construction is not something we're seeing right now, although one thing to note is the newer properties, the newer Class A trophy properties are leasing up well, even in this COVID environment.
What do you see going out the next 18 to 24 months? What do you see happening?
I think we all would like to know what that question is, answer to that question is. I think the whole work from home, and I've argued on Clubhouse and various Zoom calls about, everybody has a different approach about the whole work from home movement. I'm not as bullish on it as some people maybe in the tech industry or other industries think so. Most people I talk to, my clients, everybody's going back to the office, but that's the $64,000 question is, how is everybody going to react to the work from home movement and the hybrid model, and how is that going to impact how much space they take and their layouts and density going forward? Nobody really, I don't think any of us know the answer.
Yeah. No, I know that we're all hoping that the work from home doesn't take as big a hit as everybody's been saying it is, but we've seen in Los Angeles, I'll let George touch on this, I guess, since that's why he's here, but we've seen a lot of activity increasing over the last few weeks, so we're very thankful that here in Los Angeles. So did anybody else have any questions for Coy?
I do. So Coy, what was the immediate reaction from the governor's announcement? I mean, did you have any clients immediately reach out to you? Has there been any impact so far, even though I know it was just announced, but anything so far?
I can only speak to our office, which we have been either shut down or working on a skeleton crew in terms of administrative support and staff over the last 12 months. And we opened back up last week. We're still going to wear a mask in the office, but we have relaxed some of our protocols. But generally speaking, Texas is, politics aside, pretty much a red state, so most people are pretty happy about it. But then there's still a significant part of the population says we're all going to die. So just kind of a mixed bag of attitude towards the whole mandate.
Okay, curious. Okay.
Okay. Hey, John, let's start with you. What's Dallas looking like?
It sounds a lot similar to Coy's office right now. I'll start with the question, Natalie. I'll answer your question about what we've been seeing with the mask mandate being closed or gotten rid of, and then I'll work backwards. Funny enough, it didn't make much of an impact in terms of interest, or has not yet, right? Because it doesn't go into effect for another, I think, 72 hours. And we haven't seen much of a change because of that, but we had seen what you might expect is a little bit move back towards the office. But funny enough, we already saw that starting in January here in DFW. Mostly, in fact, I would say almost all small tenants, so maybe 2,000 to 10,000 square foot office users. We saw a huge jump in engagements just in our office, and then in talking to the landlord leasing agents across the city, having going on a lot of tours this last 2 months. We're DFW across the board. We're seeing a huge interest in these smaller to medium sized footprint users going back to work, and I'd say probably 80% of those are localized, not national type users. And so that's been great. And one of our large clients in our office, one of my biggest clients, is a executive suite operator that's been around for 20 years. And I touched base with him this morning, asked him what he's seeing, because I think that really those executive suite smaller users are a little bit of a precursor to what we see in the medium and large size users activity. And so we pay a little bit of attention. And he said that January, February were two of the biggest sales months. Week over week, every single week was the biggest sales week that they've had in 20 years of operation. And so that's a really great sign for them. And I think it's a great sign for the city. Overall, if you look at DFW, I mean, we're a really massive metroplex, and we've got some really cheap rents, $12 a foot full service, up to some really expensive rents, right? And so it's hard to just say a market rent. We're in the Star. We're lucky to be up here in Jerry Jones's development, and so we're mid 50s per square foot. So I know that you LA people and in Miami people are used to seeing those for your Class F product, but for Coy and I, $55 or so a foot is pretty expensive. I would say that as far as the actual numbers, our average rent in DFW, and again, this is taking a real wide cut, is about $27 and change. Across the board, year over year, we're only down about 1%. Now, the reason for that, and it sounds like it's not much of a shift, but the reason for that is because these, the Frisco area and the Uptown area and, the nicer areas of Fort Worth, like So 7th, et cetera, those Class A and B or A plus, A minus buildings, the nicer ones, or as CoStar now defines them, 4 or 5 stars, they're still getting a lot of action. And there's, even the ones that are not, and I shouldn't say getting a lot of action, they are signing some larger deals in the nicer submarkets. Uptown and Frisco in particular have gotten some pretty decent sized deals done this last year. And regardless of if they're actually signing transactions across the board, those 3 and 4 and 5 star or Class A buildings in our markets are really they're not discounting the rent, just like what Coy was saying. And it's across the board. Most of them recapitalized their buildings in 2018, 2019, so they've got a little bit of runway. And they have been across the board unwilling to discount their rents very highly for the most part since March of last year, right? They have been buying those rents with the concessions. So Joe, you asked about free rent. Generally in the nicer areas of DFW, like Class A buildings and Class A market, you're going to be looking at a month per year of free rent. So if you sign a 10-year deal, now one of the ways that the nicer buildings in the nicer areas were getting a little better deals done for themselves, they were starting to switch to triple net basis for their quote, which is new in this current cycle for DFW. And so we saw a lot of those Class A buildings deciding to, if Uptown, for example, they were a Plus E market before, now they're a triple net market. And in that transition, they started trying to only abate base rent. One of the switches to kind of fast forward as to what we're seeing in concessions now versus what we were seeing in concessions in the end of 2019 and first quarter of 2020, those same buildings are now absolutely giving abatement of gross rent. So that's generally going to be another third savings. So it's about a 33% savings above just the base rent, because the nets are about a third of the gross cost, is what I should say. On TI, tenant improvement packages, I would say that in those Class A buildings, it's way across the board. It depends on where they are because it's all a function of what they're getting in their rent. But a pretty good good metrics for DFW in general that I use, and maybe it's just because I'm super aggressive, but we generally see a tenant improvement package on a 7 or a 10-year deal. It's going to be about twice the first year's gross rent. So if you're charging $30 a foot gross, I'm expecting to start at 60, right? Well, I'd say that we're seeing another 20% on top of that. So if I would have started asking or expected a $60 for TI quote from a landlord in 2019, I'm going in hard and asking for $75 or $80 a foot, which I know is different than, it's not the same in other parts of Texas. Like we see a much less of a TI quote in Austin, probably half that. And then in Houston, we generally see a little bit more, actually. The TI is very aggressive there right now. And one of the things that they're doing with that TI is the nicer buildings are allowing tenants to rebate that towards rent, which, you know, we've seen that. We kind of saw that go away a little bit over this last cycle at the height of the cycle, but it's come back. So again, now all that said, I just talked about how the nicer buildings are not really discounting their rent. Generally over the last year, they haven't been, but in the last couple of months, we have seen that start to change. So the exceptions to that rule have started. It's kind of on the leasing side. On the sales side, we really haven't seen a huge discount. We've seen more properties come to the market, but again, there are exceptions to this where there's some desperation among landlords, but again, the prices are not really plummeting at this point because they've been holding on and they've been trying really hard not to make any changes. As far as forecasts, and I feel like I'm leaving a lot of stuff out, but I tend to talk way too much. So you guys please ask me some questions. As far as forecast, I think it's coming back and I think it's coming back quickly. And Joe will tell you, I'm actually not a very optimistic guy. And candidly, I'm a tenant rep. I'm 100% tenant rep and I'm 95% office tenant rep focused. So candidly, I'm not happy that it's coming back. I'm happy that my tenants are going to be back in the office, but I'm not happy that we're missing this opportunity to have really taken advantage of some discounted rents that really didn't show up. I'm hoping that over the next 2 quarters, while things are coming back but not back yet, that we can take advantage of some of that for our clients. We are starting to see some of that. But as these buildings are holding on by the skin of their teeth, trying not to discount the rents, they're also putting themselves in some bad situations, and capital markets are not very fluid right now. And so that's putting them in a position where if they don't play this right, there's going to be a lot of buildings that just can't offer these discounted rents.
What's happening in downtown Dallas? People still moving out of there?
It depends on what you define as downtown, but the heart of downtown, like 1700 Pacific, 1717 Main, which we would consider kind of central downtown. Yes, people are still moving out. It has actually become a little, we were seeing a slight resurgence in our central business district. And the reason for that is because 2 blocks north of the central business district, you hit the arts district, which is just basically the southern boundary of uptown now. It used to, it's not really in uptown, but I see your face, George. You're right. It's not quite uptown, but it's people act pricing wise as if it's the southern boundary of uptown. So we see some very high rents there and some really nice buildings. The central part of the central business district, it was seeing a little bit of a resurgence just because you could get a Class A office space that was dated but still Class A in a high-rise building for $18 per square foot plus electricity, whereas you will multiply that by 3 or 4 in order to get into the uptown and the arts district. Now, unfortunately, Joe, that changed. Many of the people that were that did decide to just shut up their offices and go home were small law firms. That's the majority of what's in the central part of downtown. So it has gotten dramatically worse in the last year down there. And we have seen 2 buildings now that have actually gone to the steps to sell. And we know we're tracking 3 more, a couple of which we're just tracking on the list of possible foreclosures coming, and TREP and the CMBS debt that's on them is not, their notes are not looking really great. And so I would anticipate that by the end of the year, we're going to see 5 more major foreclosures in the downtown market.
Wow, that's do you have a concern with, every time I'm there, there's so many cranes in the air. Do you have a concern with all the new office that's being built?
I think they're all crazy, but I think they're crazy at the height of the market too, Joe. I don't know how these guys go in and develop these buildings and think. I mean, I'll give you an example. If anybody's been to Dallas lately in the last 10 years, there's a big development in Frisco, and it's called Legacy. It's called Legacy West, right? So you've got 2 sides of the tollway that have these developments, and back prior to this last cycle starting, the guy at Invesco who was in charge of deciding whether or not he was going to build Legacy West called me and said, "Hey, John, what do you think? What do you think about Legacy West? Is there enough absorption?" And I said, "David, if you build that building, I think you're crazy. I think it's going to do it. There's no way. It'll take you 2 cycles to fill it up. There's no way that there's that much demand." And you guys come to Dallas and see how much of an idiot I am. So when I answer the question, because it is the hottest building and it's full, it filled up in 45 days. It's ridiculous. So
where are those from, John?
What's that?
Where are those coming from? Are they migrating from other cities?
Well, you're going to love when I say this, but unfortunately for us, Joe, they're all coming from California. And I really wish that you would keep a few more of your people, because you're going to vote us into the newest version of California, and we don't want it. Now,
Wow, John.
Now, and I think Kristi's going to have a lot the same thing to say.
Hey, now, and so there's a lot of corporate relocations, and that's filling up for the suburban, or it's crazy, right? Because we say suburban usually for Legacy and Frisco, which is where I sit every day. Well, the reality is that the market used to be Dallas and Fort Worth, and now it's Dallas, Fort Worth, and the Frisco market. Because the Frisco market has grown so quickly that it is truly a third market. To put it in California terms, it feels a lot like Orange County versus LA. And so
because they're all Californians.
Yeah, well, you know what though?
What they build, Orange County.
Other than voting habits, we seem to be getting the good ones. They all seem to be really nice people. So, but to answer your question, Joe, on seeing the cranes in the sky, I'm always hesitant to say that that's a good thing. I don't think we're actually overbuilding too much now, because if you pay attention to where the cranes are, right now the construction starts are way down. But where you're seeing the construction starts are very specific markets. There's a couple happening in Frisco. Those will fill up for sure. There's a couple happening in McKinney in the Allen area, but then Uptown has 3 or 4 buildings that are either under construction or just started. And Downtown has one, but it's a very specific building that I think they'll do all right. So, and I'm not even an optimist. I'm a pessimist. I usually see a crane and I think, what the heck are these guys thinking? But looking at the actual construction start numbers, I think that the ones that are going on, I think will do okay.
John, you didn't do your need to give. I need to move on, because this is the longest Natalie's not spoken in her life probably. So I got to make sure we get to her next. But you need to give your quick bio, please.
Okay, sorry, I'll be quick. So my name's John Pelletier. Joe and I have known each other for a couple of job changes for me and for a while. I think 3 kids now. He's known me. I am. What's that?
He was doing multifamily and he cold called me.
That's right. I used to do multifamily, and I realized how hard that business was and how I couldn't trust anybody in it other than Joe Killinger and George Pino, so I got out. I'm part of a company here called ESRP that we launched about 7.5 or 8 years ago. We are solely focused on representing tenants that are either industrial or office. We work all over the globe. Most of our founders are old Staubach brokers, so if any of you guys knew any of the Staubach people, it's that attitude, and it's just, I don't know if it's a rebirth or not, but we're doing that. Last year, our clients closed transactions with us in 47 countries and probably every state in the union. And we are, it's good to know all of y'all, because we're always looking for good partners outside of DFW, and we're always pretty busy. My focus is office, although funny enough, about 90% of my business is office. About 90% of my income over the last 8 months seems to have come from the industrial work that I do. So that's me. And 5 kids, and just stay busy with them and at work.
You can. All right, John, thank you very, very much. And like John made a good point, make sure you guys all connect after this. Your information's up on joekillinger.co. Reach out to me. I'll send you the whole list. I know you have everybody's email, but all right, Natalie, tell us about what's going on in Las Vegas.
I absolutely would like us to call on Kristi or Emily next, for sure, because I know that we're running low on time, and one of them needs to absolutely make sure that we have time for them. So whichever one,
all right,
you'll be in good hands.
Let's jump up to Emily.
Hello.
Why don't you tell us about what's in your market, Emily?
Absolutely. I'm Emily.Currie. I'm an associate vice president at Colliers here in Phoenix. I've been in the commercial real estate industry for 13 years. I'm a native to Arizona, got 3 young kids, and I love what I do. So I focus on office, healthcare, and flex leasing and sales. So with that, I'll jump into our market. Arizona's been pretty resilient through the pandemic, just given that we have beautiful weather, at least right now. And we've got people coming here from California. So we were, I think, the #1 metro for incoming residents. Last year, we had about 80,000 new residents, which was great. We're known for our business-friendly environment and our 300 days of sunshine. So I think that's helping. And it certainly helped with, with the pandemic closures, like our restaurants, we've been able to have outdoor space where a lot of maybe East Coast states haven't been able to. So, overall, our metro is comprised of 23 communities, and we have about 165 million square feet of inventory. The fourth quarter of 2020 marked the very first quarter of negative absorption after 34 consecutive quarters of positive absorption. So that was kind of certainly different from our markets. So right now we sit about 13% vacancy, and we still have 2.7 million square feet under construction, but 56% of it's pre-leased. So that's been a little different as well. Our markets like Tempe have attracted a lot of tech companies. So we saw the largest lease rate there. We had a $48 lease rate at one of our newest buildings. And then we had one of the largest sales at I think $522 bucks a foot, and that was in Tempe. So that's where ASU's main campus is. We've had several new Class A buildings built there, so that's been interesting to see as well. As far as leasing concessions with that, a lot of the activity I guess last year has been under that 10,000 square feet. So we've seen a lot, at least in the direct leasing. It's been given a lot of concessions. Obviously, on the larger space, we're seeing landlords want to go aggressively after those tenants. So certainly, free rent. The sublease space helps if it's furnished, and that's what a lot of tenants right now, if you're larger, are looking for those sublease spaces. So as of March 15th, we have 138 spaces and about 2.5 million square feet available for sublease. So that's, a huge amount. And I'm sure several other markets are seeing that. And we're still seeing our lease rates hold. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well that, landlords aren't as willing to come off the lease rate. We're still holding strong on that. We've recovered about 85% of our jobs. So I think, I'm an optimist. So I think we're set up for success for the years to come. Certainly as the, vaccine rolls out, that's going to be a major player and help with, everybody getting back to the office. But I still think, in terms of the last 12 months and 24 months going forward, there's still uncertainty out there. I think people are structuring. I'm finding that, some tenants, they know they need office space, but they don't necessarily need it now. So if their lease expires, they may go back out to the market in 6 months and find space. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, which isn't, putting pressure on them to do renewals. Although the tenants that are renewing are doing, short-term 1-year renewals. And I've been hearing some landlords are starting to push back where they're saying we don't want to just continually do these 1-year renewals. But everybody's kind of living through this pandemic and trying to figure out and wants the flexibility moving forward. So I think we'll see kind of that paradigm shift on that 20-60-20 model where 20% want to work from home full time, 60 want to balance, 20 want to work in the office full time. So it's going to be interesting to see how people come back to the office. But I definitely think they're going to reduce their footprint, go more towards a hoteling model where they just have space available for people to come work and not necessarily dedicated desks or cubes for every person to work out of.
Are you seeing a lot of new construction?
We are, well, not recently. I think projects are wrapping up from 2020, and then it's basically, unless it's pre-leased or a good portion of it's pre-leased, they won't start construction now. So that's kind of been put on hold a little bit, unless they have a user in place.
Yeah, with construction costs, the way they've shot up has been, I'm sure it's going to change a lot of things. All right, does anybody have any questions for Emily? All right, Kristi, tell us what's going on in Austin.
Hello. Kristi Simmons. I actually started my career at the Starbucks company, John, many years ago. So I love that company. But that rolled into JLL, and then I spent 11 years there. And then I've been at Aquila Commercial for the last, I guess this year will be my 11th year. We're a full service real estate firm, but my focus from day one has always been on office tenant rep. I have some industrial clients that I just can't let go, and I love them. So like you, I probably do 90% in the 90% office tenant rep and then some industrial. But Austin has been a great place to do commercial real estate over the last few years. I think we hit record high numbers in 19, and anytime Elon Musk tweets about Austin, all of a sudden everybody's looking at us. And so we've done some good things, and then we've done some not so good things, but I think we're trying. We've grown, when I came here, we were considered a small town, and now Austin is considered, it's not as big as Dallas and Houston, but I think we're in that same competition level, or at least for the same types of tenants. Just some quick stats. Like I said, 19 was probably the most interesting year for our market. We had a record leasing activity of about 12 million. And last year we only hit 5 million. So you can tell huge difference. Obviously, a lot of that had to do with COVID. And in terms of office sales, again, record high in 19 of $2.8 billion in sales. And in last year we had 170 million, which was the lowest since 2009. And a lot of that, Austin really changed, in my opinion, and having been working in this market for 20-ish years, is in 18, I guess maybe it was around 17 or 18, we started having these large companies come in, Amazon, Facebook, Google, trying to think of Indeed. They all came in and really took over the market. Our market size, our average deal size used to be anywhere from 20 to 30,000 square feet. And all of a sudden we look up and people are coming in and doing 200,000 square foot leases or 300,000 square foot leases. And we're like, whoa, that's a game changer. And so, that has probably been one of the scarier things from our market, just because we've had lots of construction. I mean, right now we have 9.5 million square feet under construction citywide. For a while, a lot of that was downtown. We had very little downtown buildings come online vacant. They were leased. Google, Facebook, all these people kind of took pre-leased all these buildings. And we had never seen anything like that before. So I think my thought for the last 2 years is, if one of these big tenants just pulls back a little for, Austin or these companies, 100,000 square feet would make a big dink in our market. And so that's kind of what we're always tiptoeing around. I think Austin usually fares well in market shifts. When the financial crisis happened in 2008, 2009, I think we dipped for a little bit and then came back within the year. And I think what's going to help us during this time for COVID is, pre-COVID, our vacancy rate was, I want to say it was hovering around 4%, which was the lowest I've ever seen it. And so I think that kind of helped us become stronger, when tenants stopped leasing. And we just haven't seen a lot of change in the market. Obviously, everything stood still, but I think we're poised to sort of bounce back quickly, like we have in other market or in other downtimes. The trends that we're seeing is kind of I think what John and maybe even Coy said as well, which is we're seeing the leasing activity in brand new buildings increase. A year ago, 17% of all leases were in new buildings, and last year, 30% of all leases were in new buildings. And, part of that may be because, these tenants are looking for something, the tenants that can spend this kind of money don't really get impacted by big shifts in the market. The other thing is, I think a lot of these buildings are coming online, talking about HVAC, air quality, and all these tenants are, that's what they're looking for. Maybe that's the reason why they're looking at it. But we're seeing a lot of tenants kind of flock to these expensive buildings. We talk about rental rates. Our downtown market, the rental rates there are upwards of $70 all in. And again, I started in the business when it was $20 all in for a Class A building. So and that doesn't even include parking. So parking adds another $5 to $7 a foot. So it is very expensive to be in downtown Austin. And the one thing,
California.
Yeah. And we get, the thing is our market has been penetrated a lot by people in California coming here for the lifestyle, for the cost. But I'm starting to wonder if we're becoming neutral on cost because of how expensive it is. Austin's going to see the biggest thing we've had lately with downtown is we have a pretty big homeless issue downtown, and it's causing some tenants to decide whether or not they want to be down there for safety reasons. So we're seeing some companies move on the outskirts, which I hope changes because we have a really cool downtown, and I would hate to see it change so much so that tenants don't want to be there.
So do you have a lot of new construction happening?
In downtown, we have 3 million square feet under construction.
Of just office? I mean, you said 9 million square feet in development. Are you saying 9 million square feet of office?
9 million total citywide, and 3 million of that is in downtown.
I'm moving. I'm coming over. I'm bringing my politics too. So, I mean, I'm just kidding.
Right now, the weather's perfect. Don't come in August, come now.
How big is your office market in total?
In total, with new construction and everything, it's right at just over 60 million square feet.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's not too big. Okay.
Yeah.
God,
Yeah, but it was a lot. It used to be a lot smaller.
So,
Kristi, I had a quick question for you. First of all, guys, we've worked with Aquila quite a bit down in Austin. Our office has, and they're excellent at what they do. But what are you seeing on the concession side with free rent and TI?
yeah, so what we're seeing is we have not seen any landlords drop rental rates. All of those rental rates are the same. And kind of like you, I was really looking forward to a tenant-friendly market where we had all the leverage and I was ready to go to battle. And now it's looking like there's not going to be a lot of battle. So, but we're seeing, I think maybe it was you that mentioned it. We used to get 1 month of free rent on a 5-year deal. Now we're starting to see those come in at 1 month per year. Base rate only. We haven't seen landlords go to gross rent at all. We're seeing once you get into proposals and negotiations, you're seeing landlords come off maybe $2 a foot, but no one's changing anything on their asking rates. The one thing, and we did see a little bit of a trend is on tenant improvement allowances. We're starting to see landlords offer turnkey, which I have a love-hate relationship with turnkey build outs. So that I don't know where that's coming from because construction prices are through the roof, and I'm shocked that landlords want to take on that risk. But we're starting to see some proposals come in like that, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, that's what we're seeing. Not a huge shift in what it was even pre-COVID. So I'm hoping, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm hoping that our tenants do get more concessions because, I think for me, I think it's time for them. Where we see ourselves in the future is we continue to see the whole Tesla momentum in Austin has really changed our market. We continue to have, I feel like almost every week, a new company looking at opening an office here. And a lot of those are the industrial market. I mean, the industrial market is just killing it here in Austin, probably like your markets too. But it's, I think a lot of those companies that surround themselves with Tesla will sort of focus on Austin. But I feel very confident. I've not been busier. I mean, the last 7 weeks have been really, really busy. I've gotten leases signed and everything. So I am thrilled. What, Natalie?
No, that's Coy unmuted again.
Oh, anyway.
I have a real problem with that.
He does.
That's okay. But yeah, I feel, my personal opinion is just given the activity we've had lately, like I feel, last year was tough financially for a lot of us, but I feel really confident this year. And I'm looking forward to a very busy second, third, fourth quarter. But yeah, California companies seem to really love us. I feel like we have a magnet, and I don't think that will stop. Residentially, our residential prices are through the roof, but residentially and commercial, that will help us sort of get through this time.
Okay. Gabe, tell us what's going on there, please.
Oh boy, where do we start? So New York City, and as everybody's talking, I can drop all sorts of stats, but I think the big ones are we're 450 million square foot office market in the island of Manhattan. I think that to paraphrase Coy, I'm not entirely sure that I'm buying into the magnitude of the impact of the work from home movement. I think that it would be silly not to acknowledge that there's going to be a severe impact, but this is not a 1-to-1 ratio of 1 day home, 1 day, in terms of square foot reduction in office space. And so I think what you have to really look at is the local metro area, and also understand both the broader demographic trends and also the psychology of the people who are choosing to live there. Because I do think that there's this separation between the haves and the have-nots, both in terms of well, our broader society, but also in terms of cities. And so when you look at a place like, well, frankly, I think every city that's represented on this call, just doing a little sense check, I think every single one fits that bill, with the exception of New York. And when you think about the bull case for office in particular, because I'm a 100% tenant rep, I interned when I was in college at NYU for what was then Studley. When I hear the nostalgia for what Staubach was, in many ways, that is what Studley or Savills is today in North America, in terms of that dedication to doing one thing and doing that one thing really well. And on the basis of my market, 90+% of my business is in office, and I dabble in industrial and try to avoid retail as much as possible, as well as others. But you know, by and large, what we're seeing in the New York market is the migration of certain industries to other parts of the country, particularly south and west, financial services, asset management in particular. Goldman Sachs, of course, what's more synonymous with New York than Goldman Sachs? They're taking 100,000 feet in the Palm Beach, Miami corridor. When we think about tech, though, and tech's a very different story. When we think about what's happened with Austin very quietly with Apple versus what happened more publicly with Amazon in the Northern Virginia HQ2 concept, something very similar is happening in New York. Big tech all needs to be in New York, wants to be in New York, and they're leasing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of square feet. This is happening among the Google, the Facebooks of the world, and the New York tech story. And there's a reason why I'm settling on tech specifically for New York for a reason. What's happening is the origin of the New York tech story started shortly after 9/11, when Google opened up a very small office in New York. Tech in New York had always been about sales and marketing, not about the smart, well-paid engineers. That's completely shifted. And when you look downstream from tech, you realize that tech births all these other smaller companies, which in and of itself help create and sustain their own ecosystems. And so New York has moved away from finance and law and more towards creative, publishing, more towards technology and the like, and that's very healthy for the company because, and this is where the narrative comes full circle, who's moving where? Why move to New York if you're a recent college grad? Well, there's really only reason to move to New York. It's because of the energy of the city. And the energy of the city has been absolutely dead for the last year, and it's now starting to come back. And so when people ask me, what do I think is going to happen? What is my crystal ball? Unlike many of the other cities here, which has, you know, beautiful weather in Phoenix in mid-February, New York doesn't have that. And so when we track the weather, quite literally, when we look at when is the weather going to break 50 degrees, that's when we start to expect there's going to be a break in the transaction activity. Every metric is down. The landlords are going to be in a ton of pain, and that's for the foreseeable future. But the psychology of it is way more important, in my opinion, than the underlying statistics. So short term, very bullish on tenants. Long term, even more bullish on landlords for New York City.
You're starting to see people really coming back into the city now, though, aren't you? Already?
Not in the office buildings, not yet. It's starting to happen. Most of what we're hearing is a soft launch sometime over the summer. A lot of companies are expecting to be very flexible about mandating return to the office over the summer. There's the sense that it's time for people to live their lives, let loose, travel over the summer post-vaccination. But post-Labor Day, there'll be a greater expectation to be back in the office. So the streets are getting busier. They're reopening indoor dining. Things are starting to happen. It's going to be 63 degrees on Wednesday here in New York. So media capital of the world, who myself included always thinks it's about us, well, we're going to be back in the news about it being about us shortly again.
Where are your concessions stand right now?
Big. So assuming a 10-year term, and this, who made the comment about the turnkey? I think, Kristi, maybe that was you about how you hate turnkeys. We're seeing a lot of turnkeys because to build now is below what the concession is for a TI allowance. We're seeing $150 a foot in certain cases for a TI allowance. It costs for proper office installation about $200 to build in New York. Landlords can sometimes do it for $150. For $150. In terms of the free rent, the ceiling used to be about 12 months. We've seen isolated instances where we're seeing north of 24 months of rent that is outside the 10-year term. So that's a 12-year term, 2 years of that being free rent. And then rents themselves in the Midtown market. So we've got Midtown, call it about 280 million square feet. Midtown South, that's Flatiron, that's about 80 million square feet. And then Lower Manhattan is about another 80 million square feet. We're talking in sequence, average Class A asking rents in Midtown, you're talking about $80 a foot. Midtown South, because most of the buildings that are Class A are new construction, we're talking about 90 plus. And Lower Manhattan is probably in the 60s per square foot, maybe 70s in terms of average asking rents. So nice disparity across the board.
When you
How
said
far is
these
that
free
down from the
rents-
peak? That's to be pretty substantial.
Rents are down 5-10%. We're seeing not as, and concessions are up significantly. I think that's probably tracking along with every major metro area. We're starting to see a lot more aggressive deal making on the sublease side of things. So in our market, sublease is the story. Traditionally, once you peak above 25% of total availability, there's an inflection point. We're now at 28%. For comparison purposes, in the last recession, we were at about 35. After 9/11, the dot-com bust, we were about 45%. When you get above 25%, that's when you start to see true pressures downward on landlord rents because you have larger users that make larger spaces available for longer terms that competes more directly with landlord product.
And you surely don't have a lot of new construction happening right now, do you?
So up until New York City saw a ton of construction in the 1950s. Think about Park Avenue. That's where all that development used to be. In the 80s, you saw a lot of development around Times Square and Lower Manhattan. World Financial Center, the World Trade Center sites, all built in the late 70s. And then we hit a very low period in the 90s while New York tried to crawl out of recession into the early thousands after 9/11. We started to see enormous development at the end of the 2010 decade. At the end of the aughts decade, going into the following decade. We've seen over 30 million square feet of space get added to the market, through 30 million square feet to Manhattan alone. That is concentrated mostly in Lower Manhattan, but also Hudson Yards, which is an enormous new development. John, to your point, this thing leased up before it delivered. We're not talking about just two buildings. We're talking about 10 million square feet. And I am not talking about the other boroughs of New York, Brooklyn, Queens, even Jersey City. Those markets are going to suffer tremendously. Part of the reason for their relevance was because it was too expensive to operate in Manhattan. So they went to the fringes. What happens when it doesn't become too expensive to operate in Manhattan? They pull back from the fringes. So it's a bit about that.
Can I ask a quick question real quick? I know we're running low on time. So the free rent you're talking about, is that gross rent or are you base rent?
That's gross rent. So almost without exception, Manhattan is priced modified gross.
Thank you.
Hey, anybody, any other?
And just to, in case you're used to triple nets, real estate tax and OpEx generally is in the $10 to $20 combined range.
Okay. All right, Ryan, why don't you tell us what's going on in Denver?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tough one to follow, Gabe. Ryan.link, CBRE. I'm in the downtown Denver office. I do 100% office tenant rep and focus downtown and southeast, kind of the two major submarkets, if you will, to Denver. So I'll kind of piggyback off Gabe's commentary and just talk more storyline, high level stuff. Denver, just to kind of make sure everyone's aware of what I'm talking about. It's 120 million square foot Metro Denver area market, which is including Boulder, Cherry Creek, Southeast Denver, et cetera. Downtown Denver is about 30 million square feet. So quite a bit of difference between Manhattan and what we're working with here. Overall, Denver's been in a great position through COVID. Similar to Austin, there's just a ton of tech moving here. And I think consistent from what everyone else is saying, much of it's from California, the Bay Area. The increase in talent, if you will, locally has brought more of the engineering types of jobs to Denver, which has been huge. You've seen groups like Pellitier announce they're moving their headquarters to Denver. And really over the last 5 years, you could just go down the list and 95% of them are tech companies. Defense contractors are another industry that have just blown up over the last year here in Denver. I think that and tech is kind of what's kept the market afloat. But like Austin and New York, tech is somewhat on the sidelines, if you will, from an execution standpoint. There's a few groups that are moving forward with their projects that The requirements were large, 100,000 square feet plus pre-COVID. I think the good news is most, if not all of those groups put their deal on hold. They haven't gone away. I think the consistent storyline here in Denver, which John alluded to, and I think a few others, the return to work and what that looks like is now kind of the topic, much more so than where the market's at. And the market, to get to that, really hasn't changed much. If you look top to bottom, rates have actually gone up year over year, which is crazy. That's mostly due to new construction, which we have 3 million square feet metro-wide delivering this year, and a couple notable projects early part of 21, excuse me, that have kind of boosted up what the rents are asking rents are. But the big dynamic here locally is, at least downtown, is a lot of the law firms are actually the groups transacting. And why I bring that up is kind of an interesting anecdote is they're the opportunistic groups right now. Cash in shareholders' pockets is a big deal. And a lot of them are going from kind of lower tier or class B assets to new construction or nicer, newer Class A product. So the flight to quality has been real here. The landlords are putting in money into their buildings, are reaping the benefits, whether they're transacting now or positioning themselves well for 2021. I think the investment market has rebounded far quicker than most expected. Capital was definitely on the sidelines through the summer, and you're starting to see the same groups pre-COVID that would do anything and everything to get a foothold in Denver. They're coming back, and you're starting to see some pretty big institutional trades finalize in the last couple of weeks. And I think that's a great sign of fundamentals returning. I think overall we sit in a very good position with tenant demand and the increase of Bay Area folks and other Boston, New York, moving to Denver or opening offices here, just because a lot of people like Phoenix and like Austin and like other markets on the call, people want to be in Denver. And I think that's what we have going for us is 300 plus days of sunshine. You know, that the work-life balance, I think, has totally changed with COVID, people working remote and not grinding 14-hour days as much and being a little bit more mobile. Well, you want to have some fun in between, and we have the mountains and a great outdoor lifestyle. So I think in the long run, Denver sits in a very favorable position. To that point, our residential market had a record high from both the number of houses sold and price in July in the history of the city. So I think that trend is going to continue, which frankly, from the office perspective, just means people are moving here and want to be in Denver. The concessionary packages that we're getting are somewhere in the middle of what John mentioned in Dallas and what Gabe mentioned in New York. For a 10-year deal, you're 12 to 18 months of gross free rent. The tenant improvement allowances are record highs for sure. Ironically, we're starting to see many, many more turnkeys than we ever have as well. I think that's a combination of what Gabe alluded to, just cost for build out. But I think a lot of my clients specifically, they don't want to deal with it, right? They don't want to go hire a project manager and an architect and go through the hoops of designing their own space and really managing that. They just, landlord, take this plan that we've designed and just go build it out, right? And we don't want any of the exposure of what those costs could increase to. And that's true for law firms. It's true for tech firms down the list. So the turnkey trend is definitely one here in Denver. And then rates have remained stable. As I mentioned, in some instances, they've gone up. We have markets like Boulder and Cherry Creek that are just white hot. You can't find space. Rates are at record highs. So there's definitely pockets. A number of folks have mentioned it becoming a tenant market. Definitely pockets where it's a tenant market. And if you're opportunistic now, you're going to get some really, really favorable terms. But there's still, I think the large majority of tenants, at least here in Metro Denver, are on the sidelines for the longer term deals. I think they're starting to get a semblance of what return to work looks like, which will be the first domino to them transacting. Our activity is way down on a leasing perspective and kind of market volume perspective. But the fundamentals and kind of key barometers of what's made Denver thrive this last cycle they're continuing to go up as well. So we feel good. Our downtown, I'd say, is probably less than 10% occupied. So it's a ghost town. And what makes downtown is the vibrancy and the workers and happy hours and lunches. And we have a very similar homelessness problem as Kristi mentioned in Austin, which we got to sort out. But I'm currently optimistic sitting here in downtown Denver now that we're going to rebound very quickly. But I think that's the large majority of folks in our industry believe that. So all things considered, I think we sit in a pretty good spot. We, like many other markets, we just got to get folks back to the office. And I too, I will echo the many comments made. I work from home. It just doesn't work, maybe a couple days a week. I certainly think flexible mobile work is going to be part of our clients' strategies moving forward, but it's not going to be a major change, if you will, where tenants are totally getting rid of their office in general and folks are working from home, because productivity is not up. If you look at it from pre-COVID, it's not up. It's up due to early COVID. Some of these companies have proven that, it works. And don't get me wrong, it's proven it works for a lot of us in our industry too. But it's not the same pre-COVID in terms of production and efficiencies and collaboration and culture. So any culturally focused company is going to get back to the office. And I'm certainly excited for that to transpire here in Denver.
We all are. How far open are you guys right now? Do you have the indoor dining yet?
We do in pocket. Okay. And then 50% or less in the office. CB, you can't be in a cube. So if you have a private office, you can come into the office. But yeah, downtown, which is in the city and county of Denver, obviously is less than 50%. And much of our retail is taking just a drastic hit, similar to probably New York, where it's not just closed, they're gone, which is really sad.
Yeah, we're starting to see some on the retail side. Just starting to see some restaurants are really starting to fish for locations here in Los Angeles, and so I'm excited about that. So, all right, George, Los Angeles.
You want to make sure I'm muted there, so we can kind of move forward. The Los Angeles market, again, one of the larger markets within the United States, just behind Manhattan, with about 427 million square feet of office space that's available, or not available, but 427 million square feet of office space within the submarket itself. And that's not going out to any of the other submarkets, such as the Inland Empire or Orange County and San Diego for the Southern California marketplace, which adds about another 400 to 500 million square feet. What we've seen in the last year has been quite interesting in that, frankly, hard to determine. It's trying to figure out what we're seeing, what's happening, what's going on. What was of great interest just within the last 2-3 weeks, we've had a lot of influx of people starting to actually start looking now. And a lot of that is due to the state loosening or talking about loosening up the controls for going back into office space. Our vacancy rate surprisingly didn't get affected that much overall with COVID. When we look at it, it dropped about 2.46%. So, right now, just as a submarket itself, our current vacancy is 13%. We're just over 10% pre-COVID, and we're at 13%. More importantly, we're looking at an availability rate, though, of 17%. And when we start looking at that, this contributed to an overall net absorption of about negative 10 million last year. We have approximately 8.7 million in new construction coming online this year. And the actual anticipation is that, equates to about 1.9% or 2% increase overall in the entire marketplace. But what that does look at when we start looking at the expectations for this year and combined with the negative absorption, we are actually looking at, hopefully by the end of the year with the projections, that we're actually going to start seeing it go back down a little bit. We should actually have a little bit of a positive absorption this year. This is reflective of, the past few years, just as an indication. Last year we had a negative 10.5 million roughly in square feet. For absorption, the previous year in 2019, we had a negative 600,000. So it was a increase that was more than tenfold that we saw, and it really did affect it, but surprisingly, didn't really affect rental rates that much. And, one thing that we did see is that, across the board on average, and I'm going to do this both in, because I'm not sure how, LA is a little unique. We tend to quote in monthly rates versus annual rates. So, our monthly rental rate for office space right now is about $3.40 on average on a full service gross, which is about $41 a square foot. That is from pre-COVID levels it was at roughly $48 a square foot. So it's gone down quite a bit overall, but what we have noticed, though, is some of the higher end markets, specifically over in the Class A office space through West LA, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, we're not seeing a whole lot of price or concessions right now. And in fact, we actually just negotiated a deal out with a client extending his lease term, and before the stuff came back, the landlord actually came back to us and said, no, we want full asking rate, which is $67 a square foot here in that particular building, with no concessions, which was interesting. Your concession rates that you're offering across the board there, I mean, to me, I think, and I think that may be showing a little bit higher increase in rental rates overall in the effective rates, because our concession rates are typically, they're still falling within that 17 to 20% mark of concessions. And, just the rent concessions John was mentioning earlier on a 7-8 year deal for 2 years is equivalent of about 30%. So you can see that it's a substantially higher rental rate concession, not even going into the TI concessions. So for us combined, we're looking at concessions in the 17 to 20% rate, both TI and for free rent. We're also seeing some landlords starting to give a little bit of a bonuses to brokers. I don't know if anyone's seeing that right now, but some of the larger, exactly, Natalie's like, yes, I like that. Some of the interesting, there's one large landlord here. It's a large REIT that controls a lot of the Class A office space in 2 of the major submarkets here. They're offering some really great bonuses for brokers, as well as aggressive pricing that on their office markets. But at the same time, the other Class A office space doesn't seem to be offering a lot of that as of yet. Nor are we seeing some of the more creative offerings or bonuses. Like, I don't know how long everyone's been in the business, but I remember back in the early 2000s when the market was really tough, and they were offering Rolex watches if you did 3 leases in the building to the broker. And as one of the partners, I'm trying to figure out, how do I get my percentage out of that? But it was interesting in that, right now we're starting to see that, but not a whole lot. So overall, we're looking at a current vacancy rate overall of 13%, availability rate of 17% across the board. I think some submarkets, when you start looking at more of the west side market, it's a little bit lower, but the availability is a little bit higher because there's a ton of subleases. There are actually more sublease space out in the Santa Monica submarket, for instance, than there are actual direct leasing space. There's over a million plus square feet of available for a sublease right now for a backfill. And that's just Santa Monica market, which is about a 16 million square foot market. So pretty good availability. Overall, I think what we're looking at coming down in the next few months, now that we are starting to see people open up, I think that we're going to start seeing a little bit more loosening. Probably not for about 2 to 3 weeks. We're looking at restaurants opening up again in the Los Angeles marketplace, probably in April. We're still doing the heavy takeout. They just authorized some lower occupancies for some of the other, and they also just announced that we're opening up Disneyland, which is pretty sold out, I guess, for the next year. So they just announced it I think on Friday, and they sold out for the whole year. Only 15% though is what they're offering. So
office deals coming on the market for investment?
Surprisingly, we're not seeing a whole lot of larger buildings come up for retrading and are being sold. We're starting to see a little bit of interest come in there. We're starting to see developers starting to look for properties being sold. We're actually, more importantly, because I think that we're seeing a lot of ownerships that are not pushing down on the rental rates, we're starting to see a lot of medium-sized businesses actually looking for owner-occupied spaces. And it makes a little bit more sense for them to do that. So that's kind of what we're seeing more so in the market space, probably that medium to smaller building size versus some of the larger ones being traded or being offered for trade. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that no one really knows for sure what it's going to look like once these Class A high-rises open up, once we all open up, and how open people are going to be to that. I do know, though, that some of the Class A high-rise space within the immediate submarket, they've been signing deals left and right for some of the new tenants. So the activity has been pretty good. And this is in a submarket that is probably about on average, about $60 a square foot, full service gross.
Well, there's anticipation that we're going to be opening back up with people going into office fairly soon, right? So I think everybody's just preparing for that.
Yeah, no, everyone's preparing. I think they're a little bit behind, but that was the nature of the beast, in that a lot of people didn't want to necessarily start looking until they understood that they were actually going to open up. So, we have clients that we're working with right now. We're just looking at trying to finalize the date that they can actually go into and fully operate spaces. So they're in preparation, though, right now. They've been working remotely for the last 6 to 9 months, and joining the thought process of everybody on the board here, I agree with the work from home. I think it'll have a small impact, but it's going to be negligible because ultimately, it really, from what we've seen, it really doesn't work. I'm seeing that it's probably, from talking to some of the clients out there and some of the businesses looking for it, there's a combination of what we're going to see is a hybrid where it's a day or two out of the week that you may work from home and you alternate. It allows them to get the space distancing that they may need for COVID for when they do open up, but allow them to still maintain and stay in their space. So we're starting to see that as well, where a lot of clients, especially the Class A buildings, are starting to build spec suites that are COVID or pandemic, built to COVID or pandemic standards. So, that's plotted out. Everybody's 6 feet apart. They have definitive paths for traveling and ingress and egress through the suite. And then in addition to that, hand sanitizing stations throughout as well. So we're starting to see a lot of that. And, I don't know how effective that's going to be. A lot of times the landlords, there's a reason why they're called spec suites. So tends to be a little speculative.
Yeah. All right, George, I don't think you did your introduction. I just jumped right into you, so.
I didn't, because I wasn't sure on the timing. George Pino, I am one of the founding partners of Commercial Brokers International. We're based here in Los Angeles, over in Brentwood. We are a full-service brokerage company. We do everything from investment sales to owner-user sales to tenant leasing, primarily both mix of retail and office. Our weakest probably is industrial, but we are working on that right now. And myself, I do a mix of single-tenant net lease investments and then office leasing. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, George. Last but not least, Natalie Wainwright, Las Vegas. What's happening there?
I know we're over time, so I'm going to give you the quick and dirty Southern Nevada update, guys, because I know we're brokers and our attention spans are like, let's do this. So it's really interesting. I'm glad to hear everybody's updates because I'm usually competing against Denver, Phoenix, and I'm taking everybody out of Southern California, and I'm usually up against Austin and other Texas when site selectors contact me. So this is really great intel, and I appreciate all of you. Great idea, George and Joe. Thank you. We do things on a monthly here as well in Las Vegas. Our average monthly on a full service gross is $270. So we're a lot different than you guys. We have some new developments coming in, and they are going to be on the high end, and I'm wondering if our market is going to support it. And I did my math on my calculator for you guys, and it's going to be at the maximum $40.80 annually. So when you guys are talking about $70 and $80 annually, my mind is just completely blown. I hear you guys talking about 10 years. I want to have some top conversations with you offline. Because I'm interested if you are advising your clients to do 10 years right now, and if you're staggering the rents. I just completed a deal with Blackstone and was able to get some staggered rents for my law firm client that moved back to our CBD. Our office market here is about 45 million square feet, just to give you an idea of the Las Vegas Valley. So we're pretty small. We're still tertiary, even though we're now considered a NFL state, which is really exciting. It really is a mass exodus out of Northern and Southern California, with companies coming here, not asking for concessions and just saying, hey, I need the space tomorrow. And not even kidding, they want it immediately. A lot of tech companies, the biggest growth was in health services. We have some new developments coming on in 21, about 500,000 square feet. That I was really excited about until listening to all of you with your millions. And now I just feel like the small guy in the room. So I was excited about it. Some of that going up in Henderson, a lot of it's pre-leased, which I also thought was a great market indicator, again, until I heard all of you speaking. There's a lot of activity here. It's an exciting time to be a tenant rep, more than ever before. I see myself as an advisor and giving advice to my clients, and them actually heeding it for the first time, more than them thinking that they should, call the market terms and understand more than I do. Pre-COVID, I should say. Concessions are at an all-time high, with landlords sticking to their face rates more than ever, but really giving on the free rent. The tenant improvements are at an all-time high. And yeah, broker bonuses have been great. My last 3 deals have had them. And the ones that I'm currently in negotiations, 2 of them have them right now on a per square foot basis. Really a lack of inventory for me in the most popular submarkets, where I'm sending out surveys with maybe 4 spaces on them. Some of them have like 2 spaces. So it's a little bit hard to provide surveys to companies out of California where they think I'm just not sending them enough, like I'm holding out on them. Vacancy rates in our most popular are in that 5% for the size blocks that they're needing. So it's very, very challenging at times. So while I'm having a good time, and I've never been busier in my entire career, I'm also underwater in terms of not having enough inventory to provide them. So that's what it's like.
New construction, what have you got happening there?
About 500,000 square feet being delivered this year, if we're lucky. Everything, the concrete's been poured, it's going up, but COVID kind of put a damper on some things where the brokers are saying, yeah, it's going to come, but we'll see what happens.
So you're getting a lot of California people or companies, and you got the Oakland Raiders. So.
And we got the Raiders. And I like what I think it was Ryan that said, and I wrote down what you said about the law firms. That's a really interesting point that I hadn't kind of put together here. They're also moving and kind of the flight to quality as well, Ryan, in Southern Nevada. And my most recent law firm said that they had never billed more hours as they had during COVID, and they do wills and things of that nature. So personal law and estates. And never in their 30-year history and they're out of Southern California, their HQ is in Los Angeles, they've never billed more than during COVID. And they're now paying double what they were paying in their building that we sold. So because they did a sale leaseback type of thing. So that's really interesting. We're seeing that here too.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Natalie? Okay, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thanks
so much.
for coming up with the idea and having this, setting this all up, Joe.
Thank you so much,
All right.
Joe. You're back.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.